phones off or mute them. We're getting close to being ready to start. And Ray would like you to silence or go to YouTube. So.
Yeah, I'd like you to silence your phone, but turn on YouTube because Deb and LeMay are out there, and Wynn and Dave are out there. So say hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are so happy that you are joining us at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint on this Sunday morning. Welcome to all of you here in the sanctuary and to those of you who are joining us online. We would like to extend a long-distance welcome to some dear ones who are viewing us from New Zealand, California, and Washington. It is wonderful to see so many visitors this morning. We hope that we can help you feel comfortable and welcome. If you need anything, please ask someone wearing a name tag. And we hope that you can join us for coffee following the service in our social hall downstairs. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint strives to be a progressive community that accepts you as you are. The Unitarian Universalist faith encourages us to follow our own spiritual journeys and develop our own beliefs. We strive together to follow 7 principles. I would like to highlight 3 of them today that seem to align with some of Gandhi's teachings. The first principle of Unitarian Universalism is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The second principle is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And the 6th principle is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. If you would like more information about Unitarian Universalism or this congregation, please contact one of our ministers. Reverend Lynn Kerr and Reverend Jerry Kerr is here. You want to wave, Jerry? At our office, or you can also contact them at uuflint.org. You can fill out this card if you'd like to receive our emailed newsletter and be updated on things that are going on here at UUCF. You'll find those in your seat back in front of you. One Sunday a month, we have a guest minister or speaker. Our ministers offer amazing services and inspirational messages 3 Sundays a month. We hope that you will return on another Sunday. This morning's announcements are usually on the back of your order of service, but we had a snafu. Our order of service and our announcements are a little simpler today, so that is a separate page you'll find on the table in the back. We have 2 that I'd like to highlight today. Our biggest one is we're following our plans for holiday giving and sharing for this year at UUCF. For many years, our congregation has participated in the Christmas Angel Gift Program at the North End Soup Kitchen. This year, we've been asked to provide gifts for 27 children and 9 families. They need our help to have a joyful Christmas morning. Today, Raina Bick, is Raina here? Not sure, I was going to have her wave. Okay. Has a list of the children, their gift preferences, and all the details. Please see her to sign up to help these families. If you're not in church today, you can call Raina to find out how you can help. And if you are unable to shop but would like to help, we have shopping volunteers. We received the list of children late this year, so we'll have a quick turnaround between shopping and wrapping and returning the gifts to the office. Those are due by Sunday, December 10th. And Raina's in the back, just so you know who to look for, right there to sign up. We will also continue to help local nonprofits by placing tubs in our narthex, and they're already out there. We fill the tubs with items that nonprofit agencies in our area need. And these items can include toiletries, coats, hats, boots, gloves. Shopping volunteers are also available for that project. And gift cards for Kroger, Meijer, and Walmart are especially appreciated by these agencies. And the gift card should be in the amount of $10 to $25. And the agencies we're supporting include Eisenhower Elementary School support for the teachers' out-of-pocket expenses, Genesee County Free Medical Clinic, the Shelter of Flint, and for that agency, they would appreciate Visa cards, the YWCA of Greater Flint, Wellness HIV, Family Promise, Motherly Intercession, Genesee County Community Action Resource, and educational expenses for Head Start. Your help is very needed and appreciated. Also, Ruth Straw, is Ruth in here? Yep, Ruth's right there. We'll be collecting for our UUCF staff who are very deserving to receive gifts for this holiday season. And she'll be collecting through December 17th, so you can see her starting today for that. We will now light our chalice. Across the distance, the light from within me shines, sending love to all. Across the distance, your light is fuel that warms me and helps me keep my own light burning. Together, we keep the flame of community burning bright. And now, if you'll join me in reciting the covenant, recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Our prelude is actually a hymn, so you can stand if you like.
Salam Shalom.
Our time for generosity is earlier than usual this morning. We affirm the goodness of this world. We share our joy for life and stand on the side of love. We share our time, talent, and treasure so that we may continue to be a progressive presence in this community. We appreciate your continued support of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint. We will gratefully receive your donations in the basket at the back of the sanctuary as you leave, or you may donate at uuflint.org. We thank you. The order of this morning's service will be slightly different. The meditation will be part of our speaker's presentation. If you wish to light a candle of joy or concern, you may do so at the back of the church at any time in the service, and we do have 2 books there if you want your joy or concern shared with the congregation in our newsletter. I am personally delighted to introduce our presenter today. Don McAvinchey has been a close friend to both my husband Dave and me for decades. Don and Dave were childhood and neighborhood friends since 3rd grade. The 3 of us attended Davison schools together. It is a friendship that we all treasure. Don McAvinchey serves as a therapist, spiritual coach, workshop leader, and inspirational international speaker. He has led talks and portrayals as Gandhi to thousands across the United States and on 6 trips to India and now this year to Sri Lanka. His message is simple. Gandhi's story deserves to be remembered, and there is much to live by from the example of his life. Don has led 135 of these talks and portrayals since 2007, and now brings Gandhi's iconic presence to UU Flint for the first time. And by the way, this journey began at the UU Church in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a story in itself. I am happy to welcome Don McAvinchey in his portrayal of Mahatma Gandhi.
How was that? Good? Yeah? Good. It's good to see some familiar faces. My name is Gandhi. My name is Mohandas K. Gandhi. This Mahatma thing was added on later. I don't know about it personally. So I certainly have many failings myself. So Mahatma means exalted soul or enlightened soul. I don't know about that for myself, but I traveled from India, stopped in Sri Lanka for a few weeks, and we did a Gandhi peace tour of Sri Lanka in October. Met many hundreds of people there, and I just lost my sound. No, I'm back. There we are. It's very heartwarming to be able to meet people all across the world who are working for peace and justice, for ecological awareness and justice in that arena, and also to lift up the people who are oppressed across the world. So to come here to Flint, a place where we found great inspiration during the 1930s and 40s because of the sit-down strikes that happened here, our people in India were very inspired by the work that was done here in Flint. So that heritage is wonderful, and it's wonderful to be here for the first time in Flint, Michigan. In India, we would say Michigan. So I don't know if I can say it right, but you can correct me if you like. Today, I thought that we would talk about a little bit of confusion at times that I hear from people about the idea of nonviolence. And specifically, we're going to address the idea of nonviolent love today, if that would be okay. So many people across the world, they talk about our movement, both in South Africa, where I lived for 25 years, and we worked very hard. This was before the ending of apartheid. We worked very hard to raise up the Indian people who were in servitude to the British government there. And then for many, many years in India. And we talked about our movement. We named it Satyagraha. And Satyagraha was essentially the combination of social justice with a spiritual component, a spiritual dedication. What does that mean? People have somehow conceptualized it and called it nonviolence. But nonviolence is only half of the equation. Because actually what it was nonviolent non-cooperation. Both sides. And people would say passive resistance, sometimes they would call it that. There's nothing passive about our movement. We were very active, very provocative, to push the policies, to push against the laws that were instituted, both in South Africa and in India, to oppress our people. So nonviolent, non-cooperation together. So what is non-cooperation? Non-cooperation is based in the idea of ahimsa. Ahimsa, if you take that word and you break it apart, the a at the beginning means not. So like non-violent, not. Himsa. And himsa means killing. So not killing was ahimsa. But it's much more than that. The essence of ahimsa itself is love. The beauty of our movement is embodied in the idea of ahimsa and the living out of ahimsa itself. That we would love those who oppressed us. At one point, and you may know of this, in my life I was picked up and thrown off a train at 24 years old. Big mistake on their part. Because what happened was I sat there all night long at the train station in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. And I had thought about leaving South Africa and going back to India. But I realized that I had a purpose there in South Africa still. And that purpose was to fight against the suppression. They took my coat, so I was freezing, it was very cold, and I sat there all night. To me, the most creative of my life. I decided to stay. And I stayed for 25 years there in South Africa, and we put together a movement that freed up our people, that changed the laws, that opened up space for the eventual ending of apartheid decades later. It was the beginning of that freedom. And the ending, as one domino fell after another, the ending of colonialism from the European powers. That had begun, and we were part of that movement, the ending of colonialism. So, in the essence of nonviolent, non-cooperation, if you think about not cooperating, when people are oppressing you, they threw me off the train, I did not turn around and fight them. Sometime later, I was on a stagecoach, back when stagecoaches existed. The driver of the stagecoach refused to let me come up onto the top part, the upper seat, and started beating me with his cane and broke my collarbone. I did not press charges against him. When we published a newsletter, our journal called Young India in South Africa, I had gone home to India for a visit, and when I came back, one of the articles had particularly infuriated the white people there in Johannesburg. And a mob of about 500 people greeted our boat, our ship, when we landed there in Johannesburg, South Africa. And they wanted to lynch me, and they were singing the song, "Lynch Old Gandhi in the Old Tree." They were ready to take me up and lynch me. Somebody took a brick and threw the brick and hit me in the head. These are the kinds of things that we had to endure from this oppression of people of my color, people of my ethnic background, which I know that you're familiar with here in your own country. But what we did is we took our anger the fury that raised within us. We transformed it into fighting in a way that accepted their violence and showed them our humanity. And gradually what happened is they began to gain respect of us as human beings. It's very easy, as you know, to paint someone who's different than you, someone who has different ideas, different theories, different political philosophies, as what we might call the other, right? And to make them the enemy. It's probably in this country, as I've heard, here in your country, there was a former president, for instance, who some of you may think of as the enemy, someone who you never want to be president again. And I understand he may be running again, if he can stay out of jail. To take that person or his followers and make them into the enemy would be the opposite of what we tried to do. We tried, and quite successfully, to turn these people who were oppressing us into friends. That was our goal. Thought was that they were our friends, they just did not know it yet. That's what we were striving for. So the power of ahimsa isn't just not killing. The power of ahimsa is loving those people who are oppressing us in a way that allows for them to see us as fellow human beings and to stop themselves from this oppressive urge that they feel, and for us to join together instead. That's what we accomplished in South Africa, that's what we accomplished in India, and eventually the British saw us as friends rather than people, rather than the other that they could oppress. And we became friends, and they left. And they turned the country over to us. So this is the essence of our movement, nonviolent love. You might think in your own life, I don't practice any kind of violent love. I don't know what the opposite of nonviolent love is. I'm not a violent person practicing violent love. But you might consider the concept of nonviolent love in your own life, and perhaps to think about, I heard my dear friend Kathy say the word progressive. So perhaps to think of from a progressive standpoint, how to love the people who are baby in their thinking and in your perception of them, totally the opposite in terms of their philosophy, totally the opposite from you in terms of their politics. You may consider that ahimsa, nonviolent, non-cooperation, could be the essence of how you start to consider these people, not as enemy. So how do we love in this way? The very first key that we decided and that we acted upon, both in South Africa and in India, and in many, many campaigns. There was one campaign where the Hindu temple in one community was refusing to let in the Hindus who were considered to be untouchables. And in India, the caste system has been around for quite a while. To me, it's an abomination of the Hindu philosophies. It does not fit, it does not belong here, but somehow it was created many centuries ago, still lives on to a certain extent, and we have tried to eradicate it from our culture. But it's still present. The Hindus, who were considered untouchable, are now often called Dalit people. They came to me and they said, we would like to be able to go to this temple in our community, but they won't let us in. And I said, just go and stand in front of the temple and stay there as long as you need to until they let you in. So they did it. They went as a group, 15, 20 people at a time. They went and stood in front of the temple. During the time of the services, during the time where there weren't any services. They stood there for 18 months. There were floods. That area flooded frequently during the monsoon season. Water would come up to their necks. They did not leave. They stayed and stayed and stayed until the people in the temple, the Hindu people in the temple who were not in the untouchable caste, decided that they were human beings and they welcomed them in. 18 months. Standing every single day in the heat of India. Anyone ever been to India? It gets pretty hot in India. Those rains were torrential, and they stood there day after day after day. These were some of the movements that we performed in India, same sorts of things in South Africa, in order to change people's hearts. We did not want to punish them. We wanted to fight, but not to fight to punish, instead to fight to change their minds and their hearts. Because all of us have those same kind of tendencies. We all look for a sense of the other. It's very comfortable, as you know, to find someone who we can say, oh, that person is, we use words, right? Like, that person is crazy. That person is so wrong. That person is even stupid. You might say things like that. People have said that about me. Gandhi doesn't know what he's talking about. His philosophy maybe is okay, but his politics, people have said that over and over to me. So it's very easy, it's very tempting to turn people into the enemy. What we're looking for in Satyagraha, both in small ways as human beings in community, but also in larger ways across our cultures, is to remove the tendency to turn other people into the other, into an enemy, and have them become friends instead. So you might examine within yourself, when do I do this? When do I take people and make them wrong? One way to think about it is, how do I make people wrong? And you could consider making people wrong a game that we human beings play in order to say, this is my tribe, and that is their tribe, and there's a difference between us. And that difference could be as simple as they live on the other side of the river. It could be the different color of their skin. It could be a language. It could be cultural. It could be gender. All these differences so easily are made into the other and then into the enemy. The beauty of Satyagraha is that it can never fail. 3/4 of the world's population since the 1940s has taken on Satyagraha as the central core of their movement, and 3/4 of the world's population has been freed from dictatorship and authoritarianism through the use of this strategy. The abolishment of war as a method, and instead, the inclusion of love. 3/4 of the world's population. People say, nonviolence doesn't work. Gandhi, you're crazy. Nonviolence doesn't work. People say that to me. And I say, look at the evidence. It's a very powerful method. It cannot fail because we enter it from a spirit of being soldiers and never, ever giving up. So if you never, ever give up trying to show people your humanity, how could you ever fail? You would never give up. So eventually people turn, their hearts turn, their minds turn. And they see us as full human beings. This is the beauty of nonviolent non-cooperation. I would submit it is the most powerful change agent ever in the world. More powerful than war, more powerful than violence, and much, much harder, because what it requires is nearly infinite patience. The reason we turn to violence, in my view, to solve problems, is because we lose patience in trying to find ways to cooperate. If you never lose patience, you never have to go to war. Sometimes it's very scary. It's very frightening what you have to face. Sometimes people will die, and many of us died. Sometimes you get hit in the head with a brick. Sometimes you get thrown off a train. But as long as you stay patient, eventually that other person will see you as a worthwhile human being, and they will change their hearts. I learned this, and I admit with some guilt and shame on my part that I was violent towards my wife when we first got together and got married. We were married at 13 years old. And in India, this was what people did back then. And what else people did, what men did, is that they would hit their wives. And I hit my wife. And I would try to dominate her. She taught me nonviolence, non-cooperation. Because when that kind of anger rose up in me, that kind of dominance that men showed in India during those times, still to this day, to some extent, she would refuse to cooperate with me. And gradually over time, I realized the great error of my ways and changed my ways. And I honored her and respected her for the kind of person that she was. Changed my heart with her nonviolent non-cooperation. She taught me this whole method. She was the one who taught. You might think, what does love have to do with this? If we consider love from this perspective of connection, then what we could think about as love is one person in their heart connecting with another person in their heart. One person as a human being, seeing and feeling the connection with another person as a human being. And that in this connection, that connection itself is love. That's what we're experiencing when we love so deeply, so strongly, for people who are close to us, for our communities like here at the Unitarian Church. I understand there was a great bit of love yesterday. I see a couple people with these big M's on their shirts and jackets. There was a great amount of love from yesterday. The footballers or something from this university had something good happen. Is that right? Not that the other team is evil, but definitely the other, right? So, when we strive for this kind of connection that we're talking about, in a non-violent way, which means in the essence of relationship, one-to-one relationship, for instance, as the core, we might consider a non-violent love in that way could simply be stated as, I want to get to know you. I want to learn about who you are as a person. I want to know your dreams, your visions for your life. I want to know you. And I want you to know me. I don't want to dominate you. I don't want to run your life. I don't want to make decisions for you. I want us to find consensus, win-win scenarios, not compromise, but where we both can win. This is one way of taking the spirit, ahimsa, the spirit of nonviolent non-cooperation, into our individual relationships, to consider that what we were trying to do was to have these people who were oppressing us get to know us. And we wanted to get to know them at the same time, to find out why they would be acting like this towards us. What's the point? And in that struggle, in that quest, this is what we found work the very best. To accept their hatred, to accept their violence, to not fight back, and to gradually over time bring them into a circle where they saw us as the same and the respect between us grew. That was our goal, and that's what we accomplished. Let me just have a show of hands. You're all being so very quiet here, watching and listening. But a show of hands, just raise your hand. If you think this idea of nonviolent love, of ahimsa, could potentially apply to your own life. Yeah, oh good. So I'm not off track. Good. I wonder if it's time for our meditation. Would that be okay? Can we do a meditation together?
Sure.
Yeah? I'm going to sit down for this part. If you were born in 1869 like me, you'd be sitting down about now too. Some of you youngsters I see around here, much younger than me. We're going to have a question and answer period in just a little while after our meditation. And we might ask for some volunteers to come up and help us do a ceremony after the meditation. A ceremony with the lighting of candles. And in India, we call this Jatkarna. Jatkarna is oftentimes at the beginning of a convention or a conference and that sort of thing. We have a tall array on a pedestal of candle wicks, and the chief guests and the hosts and other people, other dignitaries, will come up and light all the candles all the way around. So after our meditation, it would be nice if some people would like to come up and we'll light these candles here together in the spirit of Jatkarna. So think about if you want to be one of those people. So let's move into a meditation together. You might notice that a part of you is already going into what we might call the stillness within. There's a natural part of all of us that can find this stillness or this sense of being very easily by simply opening our own awareness to it. We don't have to work to find this stillness. It's naturally there. We just have to become aware of it. In Hindu philosophy, this sense of the self, the sense of being or presence, is called Brahma. So let's open our awareness gradually, step by step. to the awareness of this stillness. As your wonderful philosopher, Henry David Thoreau, said, the still small voice within. And we become quiet. Find a sense of being centered. And within this presence, within this stillness, we might feel this stillness, we might feel the experience of this presence as our connection to, however you think of, the great spirit of the universe. Whether you think of that as God or Goddess or Great Spirit or the field, however you conceptualize this for yourself, you might feel this presence as this field, as God. And as we open up our awareness, perhaps one more step, let us focus our attention on this connection as being love. The love we have for life itself, the love we have for those who are close to us. The love we have for community. And then consider that those who you might hold in the place we might call the other, that these people are part of humanity as well. They are our brothers and sisters. And if we isolate them into being the enemy in our hearts and in our minds, we not only harm them, but we do great damage to ourselves by closing off our hearts to these other people, and thus closing off our hearts to ourselves. So let's sit with this expanded love for just a few more moments. And see if you can increase your awareness so that you actually feel this connection expand, this presence, this sense of being. To include these other people who you might consider the other. And finally, we might consider this connection, this stillness, as the very expression of God, the very expression of the universe through us. This is the universe expressing itself when we become still and quiet and feel this connection that's there all the time, in the background at times, but that we can access anytime we wish, simply by opening our awareness to this great field. This is love. This is ahimsa. And we are all part of it. So with kindness towards ourselves, let's gently come out of our meditation and come back into this room, and when you're ready, open your eyes. Who would like to come up and help light the candles in our ceremony of Jatkarna? Thank you.
Where do you put it? Around anything?
You get to be creative.
Okay.
That's perfect. I'm going to do mine. Thank you. Thank you, John. Anastasia, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Kathy, there's one more. I think it's for you. It actually has the name Kathy on the side of it. So sometimes people like to ask Mr. Gandhi questions. So how about if we open up for a few minutes for any questions? And our friend Ray is going to.
Yes, I'm going to do the microphone. So I'll remind us of the microphone etiquette. So when you get them, wait until you get the microphone to talk, because we're sharing this with people out on YouTube. You know, think of Deb and LeMay. They're out there. So if you talk without the microphone, they can hear this little voice off to the side, but they can't understand what you're saying. We've got a lot of people that probably going to want to talk. So as you think of what you want to say, go ahead and say it. And then I know you'll have one more thought. Save it for coffee, or if I get a chance to get back to you with the microphone. And Harold, the man whose voice needs no microphone.
A question and a comment that I'd like you to respond to. First of all, the portrayal of Gandhi in the major motion picture by Ben Kingsley, I'd be interested in your view on that. And the second is, I had an opportunity in my young life, 5 to 6 decades ago, to respond personally to the notion of nonviolent civil disobedience. I traveled to Alabama during the time of the '65 Selma to Montgomery March.
Yes.
We received an orientation, and as you know, King was a disciple of Gandhi.
Yes.
And one of the things that I needed to confront in my very young life was the concept of nonviolence at a very violent time in this nation's history.
Yes.
I decided at that moment that I could not be nonviolent in terms of self-defense. If I needed to defend myself or my children, and that would be my members of my family, or I was an educator for several decades, that I would probably engage someone in order in the cause of self-defense. I'd be interested in your comments on both of those.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your great service to this country and to the movement that was here for the freeing and the gradual liberation of citizens of the United States from the African descent. So thank you for that service. It took a lot of courage for a young man, I'm sure, to do that. And I acknowledge. Ben Kingsley, what can one say? Stellar performance. Over the top. That's why he won the Oscar. It's a great source of inspiration, that movie. Millions of people around the world, when it came out, if you remember, they had a subtitle. You remember the subtitle under Gandhi? The subtitle was a world event, because of the acknowledgement of our movements and what it had done across the world, and of this life that I've tried to live and tried to have my message be my life and my life be my message. The actual way I live, not just talking, but the way that I live. So, yes, Ben Kingsley. I've often said to people in answer to your question, and that question comes up often about defending your own family, that from a man's point of view, but I also think this is true for women, that if you are not willing to defend your family, even to the point of violence, then what is operating in your life is cowardice. And that is not a worthwhile expression of nonviolent non-cooperation. Nonviolent non-cooperation takes tremendous courage. And if you have to resort to violence to protect your children and your family, then so be it. What we were trying to do was to change the hearts and minds at the political level, at the cultural level, and to move nonviolent non-cooperation into the sphere of politics. And I don't mean politics in terms of elections, I mean politics about the relationships within groups within our culture, South African culture and Indian culture. We wanted nonviolent non-cooperation to show that we were being oppressed as human beings, that the greatest violence of all, the institutionalized poverty that was brought down upon us and kept us in the place that we were as a people, was wrong, was actually evil by the British government. And I know Great Britain holds itself up to be a very civilized society. What they did in South Africa and India, no one would ever say was civilized behavior. So we were trying to move their hearts, their minds, not just individually to protect a family, but to change how they felt, how they thought about us as a people. If you need to defend your family, your children, your wife, your husband, defend your wife, your husband, your family. Defend it however you need to defend. What we were talking about was a much larger context than that. And that's where nonviolent non-cooperation came into play. How's that for an answer?
That's pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering, what would it take to harness the power of nonviolence, non-cooperation in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel? Would it take a charismatic individual? Could it come from without in some way? It seems, I'm just wondering, how could it be started there?
Yes, yes. I knew this question was going to come up today. How could it not? It's a horrible situation there. And then, as often happens in history, when there's a sneak attack, the repercussions, the fomenting attack back is often 10, 100, 1,000 times worse because of the nature of a sneak attack that happened here. Just think about when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. How many people were killed? Navy people, the United States Navy people, 3,000, 4,000 people, something like that. Sneak attack. How many people died just from the 2 bombs that were dropped on Japan? 100,000, 200,000? These are cities of 100,000 apiece, 200,000 apiece. Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Think about that multiplication factor from 4,000 died in the attack on Pearl Harbor to 100 to 200,000 died from just those 2 bombs, let alone the rest of it. This is what always happens with sneak attacks throughout history, that the revenge factor kicks in very, very high for people, and we are going to show them a lesson. It's how people think. It's a horrible thing that's happening. It's horrific what's happening. And your question was, what would it take? A charismatic individual, or people coming to grips, or people coming in from the outside to help contain what's going on? All of those could be brought in as factors to stop. To me, war has been set aside in our movement as a method for change. We've set aside war. We did not promulgate war. We never stepped into war. We never stepped into violence from our movement. My fervent wish, my fervent hope is that the waking up of the people in Israel and Palestine could include satyagraha, that it could include a nonviolent, non-cooperation movement, literally on both sides. that both sides engage in nonviolent non-cooperation. And I'm not talking about the militaries, I'm talking about the people. If you wait around for politicians to make decisions around what is best for human beings, you will wait a long time. And I was speaking about patience earlier. Okay, I don't have that much patience to wait for politicians. We were provocative. We pushed the envelope of what was acceptable in the minds of the British government. We challenged a simple thing like salt. People know about the salt march that we did in India. In India, the British government, when they came in and took over India, established a monopoly on the manufacturing and the selling of salt. You had to have a license from the British government to manufacture and to sell salt. Can you guess which countries' companies got those licenses? The British companies, that's correct. It was against the law for us as Indian citizens to go to the seashore, gather up salt, refine it, and sell it. That was against the law. Think about the absurdity of that for just a moment, how crazy that is. And then you can start to think, well, let's do something about that silliness. So we marched. We marched 240 miles over 10 days, over 14 days. We landed on the shore on the anniversary of the massacre in Amritsar. The massacre where the British soldiers opened up onto a gathering of Indian citizens, which had been forbidden. You have a piece of your Bill of Rights, I believe, here that says something about the right to gather, the right to come together, to speak to each other. That right was refused us. So when we gathered, we would be persecuted. What happened in Amritsar was we gathered, and many of us gathered. I wasn't in that group. And the British government brought in their soldiers and gunned down all the people that were there. 1,500 casualties. Children, women, old people, young people, opened up their guns and shot them all. Just point blank. We landed after our, what became known as the Salt March or the Dandi March. It was also called the Dandi March. We landed on the shore, we gathered up salt, and we started to manufacture salt on our own. This is our salt, it's India, it's our country, we will make salt if we want to. Within 30 days, they had jailed 100,000 of us for manufacturing and selling salt. And the numbers kept rising. And finally, they put me in jail too. But finally, they changed the law because no one stopped. We just kept making salt. Think about how silly of a concept that is, how ridiculous and absurd that you could put a monopoly on gathering salt from the shore to sell in little bags at your shop or at the farmer's market or something like that. How ridiculous that is to constrict that. And that's why we chose it as a fight, because we found the little niches in the legal system that the British were imposing upon us, and that's what we sought to change because it was so absurd. My fervent hope in Israel and Palestine is that the people will rise up in a nonviolent, non-cooperative movement to become brothers and sisters, to forget about whatever the fight is over historically. There's so much history, so many changes have happened, so many influences, including the British in that area in the 1940s and 30s and 20s beforehand. So much history is there that the healing, just like what happened at the end of apartheid when the Truth and Reconciliation Committees were put together, the same kind of healing is needed, and that the people themselves will call for that. And they must not wait for the politicians. How was that?
Leaping into action.
I was at a ceremony for dedication of the Gandhi statue at Wilson Park in downtown Flint.
Yes.
And there were people protesting. And I see this in our current politics, attacking the person. They were protesting, saying that Gandhi was a pedophile. We see, I think about King and his infidelities, and I think about Trump and his infidelities. And so anybody who is a leader, whether you agree with them or not, gets attacked. How would you respond to that in the history of human fallibility or frailty? You've mentioned Gandhi's early abuse, if you will, of his wife. So how do we deal with that when we know the leaders are often infallible, including women as leaders, and yet the message, some of the message is usually so powerful and good?
Yes. I'd like to answer that from myself. And I'd also like to have my friend Don answer that in just a few minutes, if that would be okay. So both sides, yeah? So from myself, Brahmacharya was the decision that I made in my 40s. So now, being born in 1869, a very long time ago, to no longer engage in sexual activity, to stop. And historically, in Hindu tradition, part of what would happen in Brahmacharya is that we would try to test ourselves, to make ourselves stronger, so that when the sexual forces would come up, we would be able to withstand them and overcome them. And one of the practices was to lie, as a man, to lie with women. And this is where the pedophile accusations came my way, because what I chose to do was to lie in bed, not touching, nothing sexual, but to lie in bed with my grandnieces. Today, and soon after, when I started to really consider this, that is obviously not a good thing to do. It's a very hurtful thing to do. But at the time, I was following this Hindu tradition. Part of what was true for me throughout my life is that I became convinced that truth, telling the truth, living the truth, is an expression of God. So God is truth, and truth is God. So I had to reconcile within myself many times throughout my life that what I had been doing, for instance with my wife, with my grandnieces, had to be changed. And I had to deal with, within my own self, being an infallible human being, making huge mistakes. People often would say, how can you go talk to these Muslim people in these other countries? They're so horrible, they killed so many people during when India split apart from East and West Pakistan. How could you go talk with these people? And I said, I'm such a sinner and such a scoundrel myself. It's why I'm so comfortable talking with other scoundrels. So, truth as a form of spiritual life evolves over time for all of us. And that evolution, that personal spiritual evolution, was a very, very big part of both my life and my life message, but also of Satyagraha. We couldn't expect the oppressors to evolve as human beings to the point where they saw us as equal if we weren't willing to acknowledge our own evolution at the same time. They're one and the same. As we evolved, they evolved. And within my own personal life, as I evolved, I changed. And I healed the problems that I created, and I honored and respected those people, my grandnieces, my wife, other people, human being. I say hurtful things. I've done hurtful things, of course. But I've come to a place of being at peace, asking for forgiveness, eventually forgiving myself, coming to a place of peace that, yes, there are good things that I've done in my life. Yes, there are bad things I've done in my life. And that is just who I am. It's also, to me, the essence of Namaste, that the divine within me sees and acknowledges the divine within you. The essence of Namaste is that the divinity within me is expressing itself all the time, trying to help me to move forward, trying to help me to evolve. And if that message comes from the outside and somebody says, what you're doing is quite wrong, Mr. Gandhi, then I must take into account that what they're saying is coming through their mouth, through their voice, from God. That's why I'm hearing it. Because we're all part of that great field. So that's how I thought about that. In a few minutes, I'll let Don also explain a little bit from his perspective, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you for that question.
We're going to take one more,
Yeah.
and fit Don in wherever you
Okay.
feel, and then we'll
Okay.
close up the service, and we'll do the important part, which is going downstairs for coffee.
I always look forward to good coffee.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you from my soul. You have spoken to me and touched my soul, and I appreciate the words that you're sharing from the love that you have of this good man. The other thing is, I heard the other day, I'm sure it was on the internet, that there are pockets of hope going on over,
Yes.
and that there are groups of Palestinians and Israelis that are
Yes.
just coming together, and they're just calling for ceasefire. That's what they want.
Yes.
And the last thing I would like you to please enlighten me about is, so I know I can't do everything, but can you tell me one thing that I can do besides looking within to be a better person? What is one outward act that I can do that you feel would be effective in helping other people see the things that you're imparting?
You want to be a better person
Of course.
and be of service to people, sounds
Of
like.
course.
Is that what you mean?
Of course.
You don't mean getting better at tying your shoes or something?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
You got my drift.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for your comment, too. It's wonderful to hear that this is touching your heart. Yes, in this psychological world that we live in, so much effort is put into having us believe that there's something wrong with us. My friend Don is a therapist. He's familiar with this thing. I don't know if you know about this book. It's called the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And that's where the diagnoses for mental illnesses live. In the 1970s, prior to 1973 or so, homosexuality was in there as a mental illness. There was a vote held in 1973 by the members who make up the committee for the DSM. And the vote was that homosexuality is no longer a mental illness. Think about how absurd that is. You can vote that people aren't mentally ill. What? What sense does this make? But it's indicative of what has happened in the culture since psychology itself has become such a prevalent force in culture. So many of us walk around these days examining ourselves with a negative, nasty, critical voice operating. Anybody relate to the negative critical voice operating in your head? Yes. Me too. The very first thing I would suggest is to come to peace with the fact that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Nothing. There's nothing wrong with any of us. There are patterns in our cultures that drive people into certain behaviors and ways of thinking about themselves and about other people. As a human being, there's nothing wrong with you or anybody else in this room. Nothing. Because I know this, because people have been so strong and resilient forever, or none of us would be here. That strength is what we can rely on. To let go of the idea that there's something wrong and move into saying, what is coming through my spirit? How to live? What appeals to me? What's attractive to me? Of all the choices in the world, what's interesting to me? Do you want to be a surfer in the Pacific Ocean? Go be a surfer in the Pacific Ocean. There's a wonderful movie. I think his name is Robert Redford. He portrayed a serial bank robber who got out of prison finally at the age of 75 years old and promptly within 3 hours robbed another bank. He said, I just love robbing banks. I'm not advocating criminality, but what a wonderful spirit to say, I'm just going to do what it is that feels like the right path for me to do. So you might consider starting with the foundation that there's nothing wrong, that you're a wonderful person. I'm sure this person next to you would absolutely agree with me. And then from that wonderfulness that's within you, look around the universe. Say, what's calling me? There are homeless people here in Flint. There are places to feed people who don't have enough money. There's ways to be of service to people who aren't as blessed, as privileged as we may be. That might be one way to think about, what can I do? There are children in elementary schools who love having people read books to them. Why not? So just to take a look around and say, okay, what is my spirit calling for me to do? That's what I did that night at the train station. I sat up all night long, freezing. It was the most creative night of my life. And I decided that my duty was to stay in South Africa and help the Indian people there. It was my duty. That's what I'm talking about. Letting yourself have, if it has to be a dark night of the soul, it can be a light night of the soul. But whatever, to go into that space and continually go into that space. Say, what's next? What's calling me? What does my heart say? And just follow it. Thank you. I wondered if Don could have just talk before we stop. That'd be okay? He's been itching to talk. So I just want you to know that Don has been with me from the beginning, and that it's a very challenging thing to hold the space of Mahatma Gandhi. That's quite a piece of work. Ben Kingsley did it in such a wonderful way. Go Blue, by the way. I'm a graduate of the School of Social Work, 1986. But our friend who's now left had a question about what about these people who are failed human beings becoming leaders, right? So we'll set Mr. Gandhi aside for just a moment, and I'll just say one quick answer, and we'll come to a close here today. If we waited around for people to be perfect human beings before we elected them, how long would we wait? Quite some time. What can we do? I think what we can do is we can ask for people to be accountable. Can people be accountable for their lives? Can they own up? Can they apologize? I had a near-death experience in 2007. Came close to dying. I was in the hospital for a week. And I just really got it that I just am who I am. And I've made horrendous mistakes. And I've done some really good things. I love my children. I love my partners. I love my community. I love my friends, my family. And I've done some really hurtful things to those people and to other people. And from that moment, when that little epiphany happened for me, I was on crutches from the surgery, from these blood clots. I had 36 blood clots in my lungs. That's what I almost died from. An epiphany that led me to be able to say in absolute peace, seeing my life in front of my eyes, literally, I saw my life in front of my eyes, all the good and all the bad. And I felt, when that happened, I just moved into a place of peace, and I just felt, I just am who I am, and that became my mantra. I just am who I am. And still today, from 2007 to today, that mantra comes up for me, and it resonates so strongly still. And it's so easy to apologize now, because I don't stay attached for very long to feeling ashamed or guilty for making human mistakes. I just apologize sincerely. I have a change of heart, which is what we're always looking for, right? When someone apologizes, we want not just their words, we want a change of heart, right? So I have a change of heart. I see that I hurt you. And Gandhi has been a really wonderful teacher for me through all these years. This is number 136 of my portrayals and talks. It started at the Santa Fe Unitarian Church, which was a lovely moment in my life. I was a member there for years. So, can we ask for accountability? Can we ask for a change of heart from the people who are leading us? I think we can. I think that's a fair thing to ask for. If they say no, or they make an apology, like I've been noticing this one party, starts with an R, they apologize in a way that somehow never seems like it's taking any responsibility. Democrats like dive into their guilt, and there you can see them feeling shame and all that, and wrestling with it. But these other people, the apology never seems like it's actually sincere, or it's just blown off, right? Like, it's a lie. She's telling a lie, that one guy said to 27 people who were lying about his infidelities. Anyway, that's part of what I think can happen, is that we can move into a place of asking for accountability, and we don't have to be perfect ourselves to ask for that. It's okay to be an imperfect human being, and then that's a good thing to ask for. And ask for an apology. If they don't come forward with it, ask them for one. I've sat with 400 or 500 families as a therapist where sexual abuse has happened, and we have the perpetrator get down on their knees and beg for forgiveness. And then we have the parents get down on their knees and beg for forgiveness for not protecting the child. And every single time I've reached for the Kleenex box, because when mothers and fathers apologize, it's the most heartbreaking moment. It's just incredibly difficult, and they do it, and they're courageous, and it changes their family. So I know that that kind of apology can happen in the most difficult of situations, like the most difficult. Sorry that our friend is gone for the answer to this, but I hope that's an okay answer coming from me instead of from Mr. Gandhi.
Thank you so much.
I think we're ready. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste.
peace on earth. And
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as our Father. We are family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
thank you, Dan, for the beautiful music today. Our closing words today were recorded by the reporter Edward R. Murrow during Mahatma Gandhi's funeral procession. Murrow said in part, "In the words of General George C. Marshall, the American Secretary of State, Mahatma Gandhi has become the spokesman for the conscience of all mankind. He was a man who made humility and simple truth more powerful than empires." And Albert Einstein added, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this, in flesh and blood, walked upon the earth." We'll now extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, the flame of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you so much for your patience today. I think it was definitely worth our extra time, and we hope you'll join us downstairs. And some of us may go to lunch at the Indian restaurant on Linden Road after coffee hour, so you are very welcome to join us and follow us there. So thank you again.